Good evening, Hall of Fame Dynasty members. It is I, your commissioner, Jonathan, once again with a baseball review this week. And we've got a hell of a week this week because last week was really something special. When you see what I'm about to break down tonight, I don't think we'll see much like this because of what happened last week, because of the teams that faced off, because of everything that went down. We had a real special week, and I don't know how many people really know it, just based off of the scores and what was tied and what wasn't, and the way things are actually playing out so far this season. We've got a hell of a season going on so far. So there's a lot to get to tonight. I'm excited to talk to you guys. I want to say that just once again, thank you guys for everything that you guys have done so far. This has been a fun season. This has been a fun first year that we got through, and now we're into our second year. So there's actually a lot of good news and a lot of funny news that I've got to start tonight. So I figure you guys probably saw the story I shared earlier today of what baseball players lie about and what they've said their jobs are when somebody asks them what they do when they don't feel like saying what baseball player, or they don't want to say that they're a baseball player. If you look at that story, it's absolutely hilarious. It's great. I suggest you go to the Slack channel, find it, and read it because there's a lot of funny ones, especially who was it? Kevin Gausman of the Atlanta Braves, of course, said that he was a blimp folder, and apparently people have believed him. Apparently people are very trusting when you first meet them. So, I mean, it's really worth a good 5-6 minute read. You'll get a good laugh out of it. If you need a laugh, go ahead and read it there. But let's get into the show tonight. And the first story I've actually got is actually pretty interesting. I didn't know if anyone else had seen it yet. And it is going to involve an old baseball player that many of you probably should know. And that would be Carlos Zambrano. He is actually attempting to make a return to the MLB at some point. And he decided to do this after an encounter with God, is what he said. He wants to make it back to the big leagues. He figured he has a chance because Bartolo Colon was pitching when he was 44, and Carlos Zambrano is actually only 37 years old. As many years as he's been out of the league, he's only 37 at this point, which is fairly impressive, and he used to be really good. Obviously, a bit of a hothead back in the day. He would fight with his teammates at times, yell and scream at them. But I'm actually interested in this story. He's very fascinating, and he's actually pitching for a local team here called the Chicago Dogs. So keep an eye on him. I think that's an interesting story to really have some fun with and keep on top of. And the last time he pitched, he was actually throwing around 92, 94 miles an hour. And it hasn't been pretty if I'm trying to actually pull up his stats right now. I doubt I'll find it, but at the same point, he's hitting decent speeds. It's not like he's throwing 85, 86, but he's pitching very, very well for the most part, at least in terms of velocity and movement. So maybe we see a return to grace with him at some point. But moving on, speaking of unexpected occurrences, Joey Votto actually fouled out to first base for the first time in his career last week. This was on Thursday night. He has never fouled out to first base, which is amazing considering he is a left-handed hitter. And, I mean, most of the time they're going to pull the ball to the left side. Actually, let me double-check. Let's see. Yes, he does bat left-handed. So when you pull the ball, obviously you're going to pull it to the side that you bat from. So he is likely to pull the ball to first base fairly often, but this is the first time he's fouled out ever in his career. That is 13 MLB seasons, 6,829 plate appearances, and he's seen over 27,000 pitches. We know he's got a great on base. We know he used to have more power than he's currently shown over the last year and a half. But this is a guy that is going to be a Hall of Famer that just finally fouled out. It is an absolutely ridiculous record that no one will ever break. But I figured that was something that needed to be put out there just to kind of revel in his ability to just be such a good hitter. Now, this third story takes a little bit of explanation, and I will always post it if you guys want to read it. But Jeremy Jeffress has bought a food truck, and he's bringing it to Milwaukee this week and probably for a longer time. But simply put, Jeremy Jeffress grew up around a seafood type place called, actually, let me pull it up here. Jeremy Jeffress, because I want to get the facts right. There it is. So he grew up, come on. There we go. It'll be called JJ's Bread and Butter, and according to Wall Street Journal, it'll serve up sorts of delicious fried seafood that he grew up with in South Boston, Virginia. His favorite spot used to be called Breed Loves, and as he embarked as a major league career, he always wanted to bring fish and shrimp to the masses. He actually made this promise that once he made it to the All-Star game, that he was going to once he was an All-Star, he was going to bring this to the masses. He was going to do something for it because he made a promise with a friend back in the day when he was still in the minor leagues. And he actually called up Alfred Ford, the son of the original owner of Breed Loves, and asked him to man the fryer on the food truck. So it's going to be a lot of fun for Jeremy Jeffress. It's something pretty interesting that, he made this promise back in the minor leagues, and the fact that he finally hit his all-star performance last year, he finally got there like he had been wanting to, and he made good on a promise he made years ago. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And last but not least, on this day in 2010, here is your history lesson. The Brewers routed the Pirates 20-0. On April 22nd, 2010. And I remember that game because they absolutely just stomped the Pirates. The Pirates got 8 hits in that game, did have an error, but they still could not cross the plate whatsoever, even with 8 hits in 9 innings. An absolutely just badass trouncing back in the day. And that was before the Brewers were as good as they were the last couple of years. So that's all we have for news this week. Let's move on to league leaders. So looking at it, some of it has changed, some of it hasn't. Obviously, Cody Bellinger still leads the league in runs. This is his 3rd week straight in terms of fantasy purposes. And we have a new home run leader, and that would be Christian Yelich with 13 on the year for the Atlanta Braves. This is just spectacular. Nobody thought he was going to continue as hot as he did in the second half of last year. And you think about it, he has 13 home runs on the season right now, when last year he had, if I can find it here real quick, he had 36 home runs. He is over a third of the way there already, and we are only 23 games into the season. This is Barry Bonds level type of performance. This guy is absolutely insane. I don't know what's changed, but you can see obviously he's got the power and he's taking advantage of driving in runs as he leads the league in RBIs as well with 31. Now we have stolen bases, new leader there for the first time in the first few weeks, and that would be Tim Anderson with 9 stolen bases belonging to the fantasy Minnesota Twins and Mac, and obviously to the real-life Chicago White Sox. And for the last 2 on the offensive side of the ball, we have Cody Bellinger with both average and OPS. And Cody Bellinger is barely ahead of Tim Anderson in average, but is very close up there with some other very big names in terms of OPS, guys like Mike Trout and Christian Yelich. If I can pull it up here pretty quickly. All taken players, we'll go OPS. And we will look for, Cody Bellinger, Dan Vogelbach, Christian Yelich, Trey Turner, Mike Trout. Bellinger is just absolutely off to a hot streak this year. After a down 2018, he has lit the fire under his own ass, and he is crushing the league right now. Home runs, stolen bases, average, just everything you could ask for out of this young kid at only 23 years old. That's what we've got for the offensive side of the ball. Now, moving on to pitching. it's been a bit of a struggle this year for some pitchers. Guys like Aaron Nola and Jacob deGrom's obviously hurt. We'll be getting into that in a little bit. But there are guys that are just absolutely struggling this year, and they have even Noah Syndergaard said the ball recently has felt like a dog playing with an ice cube. If you've ever seen that, it's a big, big struggle. It is very hard to do, very difficult. And it's unfortunate because these pitchers are trying to figure it out, and the ball seems to have changed multiple different times over the last year or so, last 2 years. So whether or not these pitchers are going to be able to adjust will be interesting to watch. But some have obviously still been able to do it. We've got 13 players with 4 quality starts, and actually make that 14 after last night's game with Trevor Bauer being added into that mix. There are 14 players with 4 quality starts, being the names of Jake Arrieta, surprisingly, Trevor Bauer, Jose Barrios, Garrett Cole. Some big surprises are Marco Gonzalez, John Gray, who's having a big bounce back year this year. Strikeouts aren't there just yet, and the control is still a little bit wonky, but he is pitching very, very well for now. Joe Musgrove is still a part of that list. Trevor Richards is surprisingly a part of that list. And Trevor Williams is the last one to round out as the number 14. There's obviously some other names. I'm not going to name them all, but lots of different owners, lots of different teams. I couldn't list them all with 14 players at that point. Now, in walks allowed, we've got 2 very surprising pitchers in Hyunjin Ryu and Nick Margevicius at 2 walks allowed so far, each with a minimum of 20 innings. So they are pitching very well. They're not allowing free passes. They are limiting the damage that is done on the base paths. I could include relief pitchers. Maybe I will one of these weeks slip that in there and kind of show that. But the biggest thing is 2 starters, 2 walks allowed, and over 20 innings. Excellent control. Now, strikeouts, we've got Max Scherzer and Garrett Cole. These guys are a little bit different in terms of performance right now. Scherzer's gone a few more innings, but both of their ERAs are above 4.0, and that's not the types of pitchers they are usually. This is what I've been talking about, the fact that guys like Garrett Cole, Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, not Derek Holland, Noah Syndergaard, all of these guys have terrible ERAs, and they're having trouble controlling their pitches for the most part. They're still getting their control. They're not walking guys, but they are getting hit more often than usual, and the ball is flying further this year. They've already shown an uptick of home runs by a very big tick. I will find that later. I completely forgot the numbers. I meant to put that in. But Max Scherzer, Garrett Cole still at the top of the list as expected. In terms of ERA, we actually have a repeat winner, and that would be Joe Musgrove. Allowed a run recently, so he's up to 0.81 in 22.1 innings pitched. Second week in a row. Last week he was at 0.00. Still pitching very, very well for the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Fantasy Astros. And then finally, the last 2 categories we have are WHIP, which belongs to Blake Snell by 0.001 over Joe Musgrove, and then saves and holds is a tie between Kirby Yates and Shane Green at 10. Obviously, this is the second week for Kirby Yates to be on the top of the list, and then Shane Green returns to glory after pitching against the White Sox this weekend, and he has 10 as well now for the Minnesota Twins and real-life Detroit Tigers. So moving on, great performances, great players. Unfortunately, there are still many, many injuries. I have yet to put together a slide for this season that has not included big names or a lot of names at any point. Just kind of quickly browsing through here. Obviously, the biggest one, Austin Meadows for the Atlanta Braves. He hurt his thumb. He will miss a couple of weeks. It is a fracture. So that is unfortunate, especially with how hot he started this year. It would have been great for him to continue. But unfortunately, that will have to wait as he has been shelved for the next couple of weeks. The White Sox had some good news and some bad news recently. Francisco Lindor did return to action as of late, but then they lost starting pitcher Matt Schumacher, who was really a great story this year with how well he has pitched, especially in a tough division for the Toronto Blue Jays. after struggling with the Angels the last few years and struggling to stay healthy. He unfortunately suffered a torn ACL. Colorado Rockies are having a bit of an injury bug kind of pass through. Obviously, Joey Votto is not expected to hit the injured list, but he does have a back issue and he has missed a couple of games. He should be back soon. Kyle Freeland just hit the injured list and with a blister issue on his finger. Shouldn't be too long for him, while Rich Hill will rejoin the rotation for the Dodgers this weekend. The Astros have suffered a few injuries, the biggest one being Scott Kingery landing on the IL with a pulled hamstring. And then quickly running through some of these, the Los Angeles Dodgers are getting healthy again with Odubel Herrera expected to be back April 28th, halfway through that stint. And so that's great for them. The Miami Marlins, and actually I will be right back because it has started raining. All right, we are back in action. It started raining here a little bit. I need to cover up my grill after cooking out today. So back to it. Mentioning the Miami Marlins, they've taken a bit of the injury bug recently with Freddie Galvis and Aaron Sanchez hitting the IL, while Freddie Peralta should be back sometime soon. You've got the Minnesota Twins who are looking forward to Rougned Odor returning this weekend, hopefully come back and help boost that offense a little bit, even though they had a great week. Never hurts to have your best hitters healthy and on your team. And then a couple last ones here. Tyler Anderson has returned for the New York Yankees. He was pitching tonight. Was not pitching well last I saw. And then going to the St. Louis Cardinals, Danny Duffy will return. And then for the Toronto Blue Jays, Starling Marte, unclear timetable on him. He did suffer some major injuries to his abs and his quadriceps. Who knows when he'll be back, but they did say he will return at some point this season, hopefully before the playoffs, and can give the Toronto Blue Jays a big boost in their outfield. And then obviously we had the scare with Jacob deGrom with his sore elbow for a pitcher. That's never great. We don't know what that means just yet. The MRI results have not been revealed, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So finally, to our Week 3 matchups. We had, like I said before, this was a very, very interesting week just for the fact of, a lot of these matchups really came close down to the end of it. And this was another one here that really was huge. And this right here is an example of why you don't always look at the scoreboard at the end of the week. you would have thought once you see the score of this that the Yankees didn't give it their all, that they didn't have any luck on their side, but they really did. I mean, in the end, the Yankees lost 11-1. They did not have a great week overall in terms of wins and losses. But when it really came down to it, it all came down to Sunday. Going into Sunday, this was a very close matchup. Both teams were within one RBI here, one home run here, very little percentage points in terms of batting average and OPS, but Sunday is what made the biggest difference there. And we'll get into that here in a minute. So with the Yankees, they dropped to 11-25-0, with the White Sox continuing their positive run right now, up to 29 wins, 7 losses, and 0 ties. So looking at the offensive and pitching categories here, you can see that the Yankees weren't far off. They were only 9 runs off, 5 home runs, 5 RBIs. Obviously, stolen bases are not a big part of their game. I doubt it ever will be at this point. But their team is all about average and OPS and power and driving in those runs. Unfortunately, when you look at it, as I was talking about, let's pull up the day, and Sunday is where they really lost, where the White Sox hit 6 home runs, drove in 9 runs with a 345 average and an OPS over 1.10, whereas the Yankees just went ice cold with a 130 average and only 1 home run on the day, and that's where they lost it. They had it up until Saturday night, but Sunday they just couldn't close it out. Pitching, however, had gotten away from them early in the week with pitching performances by Trevor Bauer for the White Sox. You had guys like Walker Buehler with great performances, Trevor Bauer, Carlos Carrasco, Luis Castillo. Many pitchers pitched very well for the White Sox. So that was in hand for them for the most part. Obviously, walks allowed got away from them. But the White Sox will take it. 11 wins and 1 loss. That's a positive week. Now, the team MVPs actually came down to previous or ex-White Sox player, outfielder Clint Frazier for the New York Yankees. He had one hell of a week, and it's unfortunate that it had to come in a losing week like that because he had 3 home runs, 7 RBIs, and an average of 400. He did everything he could, and it just came down to an unfortunate week where it didn't matter as much as it should have. And then for the Chicago White Sox, you had pitcher Steven Strasburg. Really, it came down fairly close. The White Sox had pretty good offensive performances, but no one really stood out. And starting pitcher, where did he go? Steven Strasburg had a great week. He pitched 14 total innings between 2 starts with 19 strikeouts and 2 walks. Only 1 quality start, surprisingly. But that was simply because he allowed 4 runs in his first start of the week, but still did everything he could for the White Sox. In our second matchup, you have the Minnesota Twins and the Miami Marlins. The Marlins have yet to have a winning week going into this one. They are looking for their first winning week. Unfortunately, this just wasn't the case for them, as the Minnesota Twins trounced them pretty well with 9 wins and 3 losses. The Twins are actually a very up and down team this far, but they are making their case known that they are ready to make the playoffs again. They are looking for that second playoff berth. And right now they're making a case for it, as they had a down week before, but they are almost back at 500. And that is shown in their record with 17 wins, 18 losses, and 1 tie, while the Marlins sit in last place for the second week in a row with 9 wins and 26 losses and 1 tie themselves. Looking at this one, it got away from Miami often and early and often. You look at what we have here. I mean, the Twins had power. They had average. The biggest thing that the Marlins were close with was stolen bases and control from their pitchers, with being able to strike batters out. Unfortunately, they allowed a ton of walks, But pitching was somehow the Marlins' strength this week. They did get 92 innings pitched out of their staff, which was fairly impressive in a regular week. But obviously walks hurt them and ERA. But the Marlins have something brewing. If they can get their offense to kind of all click together, maybe they can have a solid week. But guys like Brian Dozier and Jurickson Profar struggling, along with Chad Pinder, it's been one facet of the game is working and the rest aren't, unfortunately. And actually, as I look at it, one name that we did forget because it is still in Minnesota's lineup is Aaron Judge is out for a significant time. And a lot of that's going to be due to the left oblique strain that he suffered. No one has really said how long he'll be out, but it will be pretty significant. Luckily, the Minnesota Twins really didn't need it, as you can see, with their team MVP outfielder Eddie Rosario, fantasy twin, real-life twin, did absolutely just stellar this week. 6 home runs, 9 RBIs, 276 average, but the fact that he had power and took advantage of runners on base was excellent. And then you had new Miami Marlin, Clayton Kershaw, moved at the beginning of the year. He pitched very well for his new squad after coming back from his injury early in the season. And if I can find him, he went 13 innings pitched with 13 strikeouts, 2 quality starts. Excellent pitching week for him, and that's great for the Miami Marlins, who are looking to raise his stock and likely try and help their rebuild this year, or what could be considered a rebuild year if that's the way they want to go. Moving on to our third one, this is a great matchup between the St. Louis Cardinals, who finished up as fantasy runner-ups last year to the Colorado Rockies, taking on the Atlanta Braves, who had a strong start and good year last year, and obviously are buoyed by the Christian Yelich, just absolutely stunning performance. And this is where the week started to get a lot of fun for the league. You had the Cardinals, coming off a bad week last week, bounce back and take 7 categories with 4 losing categories and 1 tie, putting these two teams in fairly similar marks around the 500 point at this point. St. Louis Cardinals obviously have 3 ties on the year. They love to get those ties for some reason. But both these teams sitting around 500, looking to get past it and looking to jump up in the standings. Looking at it here, this wait, why do I have it as okay, yeah, this one only had 1 tie. Next 2 matchups are where it gets insane. But these two teams really kind of played much different baseball than I expected. The Cardinals tied the Braves in runs, but as you can see, they didn't have enough elsewhere in terms of average or the power. Really, their biggest thing was stolen bases, and a lot of that came from Austin Barnes as a catcher had a stolen base. Rafael Devers somehow had 2 stolen bases on the week, and it just was the weirdest of people who added stolen bases up this week for the St. Louis Cardinals for some reason, and it worked out in their favor in terms of it. I mean, Billy Hamilton obviously expecting, but Ryan McMahon was also in there, Hernan Perez, and where the Cardinals really showed their strength, at least this week versus the Atlanta Braves, was pitching, as you can see by their 4.25 ERA, 97 strikeouts, and that was actually in 78 innings. So good week there. They were able to limit the damage for the most part, and they were able to get some decent quality starts out of their staff, whereas the Braves just happened to struggle this last week. It seems like their team has gone mostly cold. Obviously, Cano had a decent week, but he's now hurt. As we talked about earlier, Carlos Correa has struggled. DJ LeMahieu, the team that they have built hasn't gotten off to the hottest start, but their offense has been able to hold them for this point. I mean, if the Braves can find some more pitching, if they can find some depth when it comes down to it, they will be excellent. But guys like Trevor Richards, Jacob Junis, Sean Doolittle are kind of struggling at this point, and especially Brad Boxberger with 2 innings pitched, 4 walks, and a 13.5 ERA isn't going to get it done. They've probably got to bolster that if they have the opportunity to, unless some guys can come back and pitch the way they're supposed to. Obviously, Corey Kluber with a 5 ERA in a week doesn't help whatsoever. And fantasy MVPs for this week for these two teams are starting pitcher James Paxton for the Cardinals and outfielder Christian Yelich for the Atlanta Braves. If you don't know what Yelich has been doing, last week alone he had 8 home runs, 16 RBIs. That's good for most people for a month. I mean, Christian Yelich has been absolutely insane. It's hard to believe what he's done this early in the season. Like we talked about earlier, for the St. Louis Cardinals, it had to be James Paxton because he had a wonderful week pitching as he took on – where did he go? There he is. He took on the Kansas City Royals and the Boston Red Sox last week, combined for 14 innings, 24 strikeouts, and did not allow a run in those 14 innings. So excellent week for him. Can't wait to see if he can hold it up in a very tough division. That move to New York has not been as scary as many people thought it would be, but they are getting the use out of him as he has 29 innings on the year with 43 strikeouts. Excellent pickup there for the New York Yankees and obviously St. Louis Cardinals. And this is where these last two matchups are the most fun because this has been the closest we've had any week between any fantasy sport that we have played together. And that begins with the Toronto Blue Jays, 2 new owners with the Toronto Blue Jays and Steve, their general manager, and then Chris Barnes and his Los Angeles Dodgers. I certainly did not expect the week to turn out this way. I did believe in the Toronto Blue Jays. They've got a ton of talent with Jose Abreu, Javier Baez, Manny Machado, all the talent's there. Unfortunately, half his team has started cold, including Mookie Betts, who finally still has yet to heat up as he had a 0.000 average last week, and that was in 10 at-bats. Struggled last week, but the Blue Jays still found a way to win as they had 5 wins, 3 losses, and 4 ties. This is why I said it was interesting because you had almost as many ties as you did wins for a team. And it's just the fact that these two teams played that well against each other, and it really brings some interesting play to the standings for the year because those 4 ties are going to make a difference. Those 4 ties in 1 week could make all the difference at the end of the year. Whether it's a couple of wins here or there, that's all it takes. Obviously, both these teams sitting right around the 500 mark with the Dodgers directly at 500 with 16, 16, and 4. Looking at it here, the ties that they had were in runs, home runs, quality starts, and saves and holds. Saves and holds, you can expect. Quality starts is bound to happen. You don't always get a ton. But when you tie it in power and runs, it's it's hard to do considering how much it takes. Even with our large rosters, you expect somebody to be able to step up and get that 1 run here or there. But these two teams played very close to the vest. The Blue Jays obviously had more run opportunities with a few more RBIs, but they didn't hit as well overall with a 246 average, where the Dodgers hit over 300. And while the Blue Jays did not have the gaudy strikeout numbers that you would expect from many people, they were able to limit runs with a good ERA over the Dodgers, whereas the Dodgers had the strikeout power. They had the ability to mow down hitters. Unfortunately, they did allow more runs because of that. Now we have 2 infielders who will be the fantasy darlings for this week in Javier Baez, who put up 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 8 runs as well. No one else really stood out. There were a few other guys. Obviously, that was one of the names. No one really on the pitching side for the Toronto Blue Jays at this point, but Javier Baez is still hitting just as well as he did last year, still putting up the fantasy stats that we expect. Maybe not as many stolen bases, but he's still fighting that regression that everyone expected for him. And then for the Dodgers, you have breakout star first baseman and infielder Christian Walker, who not only nailed 2 home runs over the wall, but also provided 2 stolen bases while batting over 500 on the week. Excellent week for him. Only 4 RBIs and 4 runs, but when you're able to provide power and speed as a first baseman, that is something that is very hard to find, especially for a breakout star in Christian Walker, who is 28. I don't expect him to hit 500 on the year or even 347 on the year as he is, but he's providing fantasy relevance at this point, so you can't deny it. And moving on to our last one of the week, you have reigning fantasy champion caught myself there. Reigning fantasy champion Keith taking on the previous who hold the number one overall fantasy pick this year in the Houston Astros, who have been actually a very great Cinderella story at this point, 3 weeks into the season. And just like this last matchup, it ended in a score of 5-3-4 with the away team pulling away the victory. And this one also came out of the jaws of Sunday night. And if you were to look at it, everything came down to Sunday once again, just like the Yankees and the White Sox game, just like many of these matchups this week. So with that 5-3-4 score, that brings the Rockies up to 21 wins, 9 losses, and 6 ties, whereas the Astros are sitting 17-14-5. Both these teams can't get away from ties. They seem to love it. They seem to love being in such close competition. And that's not a bad thing for the league. It's great to see teams that were expected to finish very differently play these very close games. So the obvious categories that jump out are you have runs, RBIs, quality starts once again, and what is the fourth one there? Strikeouts. So you look at how close this one really was. The Astros had 2 less home runs. They had a bunch less stolen bases. That's expected. But you look at 1 walk more by the Colorado Rockies. We could have had a week with 5 ties in one matchup. You also had a .01 difference in ERA and 1 save and hold different between these two teams. These two teams played to their absolute limits. The Colorado Rockies snuck out with a victory, and that came because of Sunday, where they were able to put up 6 home runs over the Houston Astros, where the Astros had none. 15 RBIs on the day is what got them to that 48-point mark. Obviously, ERA took a hit for the Rockies on that last day, whereas the Astros put up a 2.1, where the Rockies had 3.8, and the Astros were able to nab 2 more saves and holds that day, bringing them up to 5. But these two teams, it took the Rockies a 6 home run day and 15 RBIs, thanks to Buster Posey with a home run. You had Lorenzo Cain, D. Gordon with a home run out of nowhere, 2 home runs for Jock Peterson, George Springer with a dinger. You had some excellent performances just for the Rockies to nab this one from the jaws of death. And even with all that, the team MVP for the Colorado Rockies belongs to Trevor Story. This one was really tough for me. I wanted to give it to Jock Peterson simply because of what he did on Sunday. He did have 3 home runs on the week, only 4 RBIs and 3 runs. That was the tough part for me, and only 15 at-bats. So I gave it to Trevor Story, who had a full week of at-bats, only 1 home run, but 4 RBIs, 4 stolen bases. The stolen bases being key here because that was their runaway category and providing that excellent OPS at over 850. As for the Houston Astros, we have our first catcher of the year that is team MVP, and that catcher would be Omar Narvaez, who had 3 home runs on the week with a .467 average. Excellent week for him as he plays behind the plate, trying to lead the pitching staff, and is still able to provide some fantasy greatness for offense. So that's what it is. Those are the week 3 matchups. Some excellent performances, some very close matchups, even regardless of what the scoreboard says in terms of wins and losses. All these teams played very, very close. The only one that really ran away was the Twins over the Marlins, where they just kind of got stomped everywhere. Now, moving on to week 4, we've got some very great matchups. And in this first one, this will be the Battle of the West. You have the Dodgers in the real-life NL West with the Houston Astros being in the AL West. And I'm excited about this matchup because the Dodgers sold off some big pieces looking to rebuild this offseason. The Houston Astros did the same thing, but they're actually performing pretty well to start the year. As I said, both these teams are around 500. This will be fun to see between these two. This one took some research for me. This one took a lot to decide on, but I'm going to go with the Houston Astros this week. I think they can pull off a win. I think they will look great this week, and I'm excited to see what they can do. So give me the Houston Astros in this 500 mark, and I'm going to actually name it the Battle of the Rebuilds. I've got the Houston Astros winning here in week 4 and moving them up into hopefully a more positive second place over the Atlanta Braves in the Hank Aaron division. In the second battle here, we've got the Minnesota Twins taking on the St. Louis Cardinals, and this is going to be a big decider here. Obviously, both teams sitting at close to the 500 mark as well. The Twins are sitting 4th in their division in a very tough division, along with the Cardinals sitting at 3rd. So this one took a little bit more research. This one took some time. But I'm going to go with the Minnesota Twins. They've shown a lot of promise. They stomped the Miami Marlins, and that's what you've got to do when you face a bad team. When you face a team that's hurt, when you face a team that's cold, you've got to be able to beat them convincingly. So give me the Minnesota Twins. I'm not sure what to think of the St. Louis Cardinals just yet. They've been tooling all this year with guys like Jonathan Lucroy, Colton Wong. They've taken advantage of very hot hands, and it's played very, very well for them at this point. But can they keep it up? It's hard to tell what exactly the St. Louis Cardinals team is, especially with all the moves they made this offseason. They did get healthy with Gregory Polanco finally returning to play, so it's great for them in terms of offensive performances. But I'm going to go with the Twins. Next, in the Miami Marlins and Yankees, I'm actually picking the Marlins to have their first winning week on the year. The Yankees, unfortunately, are half dead at this point with guys like Giancarlo Stanton out. You've got 6 offensive performers, most of them from the Yankees, in Stanton, Hicks, Gregorius, Andujar, Sanchez. The only one that isn't a Yankee would be Scooter Gennett, who has yet to play a game this year. And then you also have guys like Brandon Morrow, Tyler Skaggs, Tyler Anderson, who did return to play tonight, but has not played very well. So I just don't see the Yankees having a great week. They've had some good performances out of Domingo Germán and more guys, but give me the Miami Marlins this week. Now, in this one, we've got the Atlanta Braves taking on the Toronto Blue Jays. And the Blue Jays at this point have struggled just simply because of players being cold to start the year. Whether they're going to remain that way is hard to tell. But you on the opposite side of the field, you have the Atlanta Braves, who have the hottest player in all of baseball, and Christian Yelich, carrying their team, making up for some cold performances from Ozzie Albies and Robinson Cano, Eduardo Escobar, some guys that are expected to be better than this but haven't been. I mean, Malik Smith is hitting less than 200 on the year, but has 7 stolen bases somehow. That itself is impressive. And while it is that way, while the Toronto Blue Jays are cold, I don't know what to think of them just yet. So give me the Atlanta Braves, who do have Michael Brantley performing. Ronald Acuna Jr. is playing very well. And obviously, like we talked about, Christian Yelich is in Bonds-level territory at this point. Why teams are still pitching to him, I don't know. But he's going to take advantage of it one way or another. Now, finally, we've got the Colorado Rockies taking on the Chicago White Sox, the battle of the first-place teams 3 weeks into the season. And this should be a fun one. I mean, these two teams have battled in hockey, in football, 2 of the top teams in their respective sports as well. And I expect this one to be a battle, knockout, drag-out fight all week. And as I wanted to pick against my team, but I'm excited because we may see the debut of Vlad Guerrero Jr. this week, which would help my team in the fact that Eloy Jimenez will miss part of this week, being on bereavement leave since his grandmother just recently passed. Obviously, he hasn't been the hottest hitter, but if Vlad Guerrero Jr. is finally able to debut, that would help make up for Travis Shaw and Jesus Aguilar being cold as all hell. The Colorado Rockies, though, are a very tough team still, with Buster Posey obviously struggling right now, but you have Jose Altuve, who's returned to form. Jeff McNeil has been a fantasy stud this year with an average over 350. I mean, you've got some great performers on this Colorado Rockies team, and I'm not willing to write them off, especially with Chris Davis with his power and 10 home runs on the season already. So this is going to be a knockout, drag-out fight, but I'm going to take my team in this one. I feel a little bit more confident in my pitching. My pitching has been a bit healthier than the Rockies has been at this point as they lost Kyle Freeland. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very fun battle, and I can't wait to see what happens, Keith. I'm ready for this week. I want to see who comes out. And unfortunately, we do not do fantasy defense because Ramon Laureano's play the other day would have been worth so many points in my book, just the fact of what that was. And if you guys didn't see it, let me know. I will post that again because that was just a great, great play. That's all we have for this week. Very fun week this last week. Really, most of them came down to those last few hours and last day. Really made the swing, especially with the Rockies game. So keep it up, guys. You guys have been a lot of fun, and I hope to hear from you guys. I'd love to get you guys on the show whenever you guys want to join. That way you can talk shit. That way you can say whatever you want about your team or somebody else's team. So let me know. Thanks, guys, for being such a wonderful league. You guys have been amazing. So have a wonderful night and keep those fantasy lineups rolling.